Yeah, and it's funny. And then I watched Casino the earlier in the afternoons.
Yes, Casino is great. Absolutely. But we are live. We were talking movies as we were kind of getting ready to start this. We were getting situated and letting the stream run in the background a little bit. Um, but we're gonna pivot now to our weekly Star Trek discussion for Trek Live.
Yeah.
Welcome to anybody in the room. I see Trekkie Rob hanging out. I see Earl Grey, Trekkie, um, also popping in and sharing us on Twitter. Definitely appreciate that, both of you. Um, so this week we're starting yet another probably recurring topic, something that we'll double back to on occasion, maybe monthly, maybe every 6 weeks, maybe a little more than that. But we're going to call it Undervalued Treks. Um, do you want to explain kind of what we're thinking here, Dan, with
Yeah, just
what we're
where
looking
this
at?
kind of topic stemmed from was I took a page out of Bill's book. I posted a poll on Twitter, and I got some great responses as always. But there was an episode in that run that I felt like should have got more love, or at least someone should have mentioned it or something like that. Because I think a lot of big things happen in it, and Bill took that as a inspiration to kind of create this topic that we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, so I think it's going to be interesting to look for episodes since we're both kind of rewatching, you know, perpetually rewatching, always rewatching Star
Yeah,
Trek,
yeah,
and at different points in the shows. Um, I think it's interesting to look for episodes that are a little bit less discussed. There episodes like yesterday's Enterprise and Amok Time and In the Pale Moonlight get lots of attention and people know them inside and out and they're easy go tos for conversations. But there are these other episodes that are a little bit more under the radar that try to do some big things that sometimes don't get followed up on. There are big, science fiction concepts. There are big, Star Trek universe impacting ideas that don't necessarily get expanded on or get continued. And Sanctuary is definitely one of them.
yeah,
There's a big idea at the heart of Sanctuary, and it sets up something that could almost be its own show. Like you could almost follow some of the things that
yeah.
are
Or
set
a
into
short track or
motion.
whatever. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, there's a lot of ground to cover. So it's another way for I think Dan and I both as we're rewatching Star Trek. It's something to kind of look for in the back of our minds now that we're starting this kind of idea. Look for episodes that kind of stand out as this one doesn't get talked about a lot, but there's a lot to chew on and there are things to unpack. Um,
yeah,
every episode warrants a conversation, and there are lots of good podcasts out there who go episode by episode and get really good conversations out of every episode, and not always the big classics. But that's not our structure. We're not going to do that. But I do really like the idea of looking for these less well-mined episodes for discussion and trying to
yeah.
unpack them and talk about what could have been done maybe with more expansion and what we think of them. Are they undervalued? Or we're calling it Undervalued Treks. Um, it's probably more accurately under-discussed Treks, but it rolls off the tongue a little less easily.
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
I
yeah.
have mixed feelings myself about Sanctuary. I don't know how you feel about like the episode itself, Dan, but I think we're both more interested almost in talking about some of the story threads that Sanctuary puts forward and what kinds of possibilities were there. Maybe
Yeah.
even more than like the quality of the episode itself. So like everything on Trek Live, it's live, it's raw. We kind of wing it a little bit. It's not super planned and super scripted, but we're going in with this idea to talk about under discussed, undervalued pieces of the Star Trek canon continuity
Yeah.
from all shows. Um, but what were you gonna say? I'm sorry.
Yeah, just because it's funny because I'm with you. I would say maybe it's a middle of the road episode. A little bit more positive on it maybe, but when you think about this run, I think there's a better episode.
Yeah.
There's Necessary Evil, which I think was cited as probably the favorite of that run. So that's kind of the goal of this kind of new, um, kind of style of episode that we're doing here on Trek Live is that it may not be the best episode, but there's things in it that we want to discuss, which you touched on. So,
Indeed.
yeah.
Trekker Prize is here. How you doing? Good to see you. Yeah, appreciate you joining us.
Yep.
Yeah, I totally agree. We're not gonna, and I do those 4-episode polls all the time too. As I'm watching, I'll put these like these are the next 4. Which of the 4 are your favorite? And I'm not going to be super eager. I mean, we're not going to go with the episodes that win that poll. For example, like it's going to be one that kind of falls to the middle of the pack, maybe even loses the poll, but there are cool, interesting things to chew on. So looking forward to doing more of these down the road from across all the shows. And we'll see. I'm in the middle of TNG. You're doing Deep Space Nine. I know your mind is always kind of on Voyager. My mind tends to go to Enterprise a lot, just kind of thinking about those shows and reading about those shows. So I'm sure episodes from both of those shows will emerge as well, even outside of our actual rewatches currently. That might lead to an episode like this in the future. So. Before we do that, as we always do, we do a rewatch recap. This kind of is self-evident. I mean, we're doing Sanctuary because you hit it on your rewatch. So not to get into that too much, but we talked about Necessary Evil last week. I think that was the last thing you had watched up to that point. So beyond Necessary Evil, aside from Sanctuary, do any episodes that you've kind of recently watched stand out to you? Anything that you have thoughts on?
The other 2 episodes that weren't mentioned are Second Sight, which not so hot on, and then Rivals, which I really enjoyed. I like this ever growing arc of Julian and O'Brien kind of forming this little it is a rivalry, right? So it's because I know it as them as really good friends having a beer at Quark's, after work, a typical guy buddy friendship, but it's cool to see the growth
beginnings of it
through.
I love the fact that relationship starts from a rocky place. I think a lot of friendships begin that way. In reality, it's not always like an instant click. Sometimes what is once a rivalry, kind of develops, finding, some appreciation for a person that you once kind of discounted or rubbed against you the wrong way. So I love the fact that relationship's built that way, and an episode like Rivals kind of puts those building blocks into motion and really gets us there at the end of the day. So Second Sight, totally agree. I'm into season 3 on TNG. For myself, I just watched The Survivors, which is one of my favorites. I really like that episode. It's really dark, really heavy. I love the last 5 or 10 minutes of it, sort of the reveal of who this guy is and what his background is and how he got there and what happened at this attack that destroying an entire race. Very Twilight Zone-y, very creepy sort of ending that I've always gravitated to as like an underrated favorite from that show. So definitely a big fan. We talked about pretty recently because I'm kind of doubling back and in a very unconventional rewatch. But season 3 definitely is a huge step forward for the show. It feels fresh, it feels new. And it's not just the new uniforms, it's the new cinematographer, it's the new look, it's the new, seriousness in the writing. I think a little bit more character centric, a little more focused, a little more grounded even than season 2 is. Um, so excited to keep going, and some great episodes to come for me. I'm looking forward to with Your Watch the Watchers, Booby Trap, and the Enemy, the Defector are all kind of in striking distance. There's a lot of classics in season 3. One of the high points in Star Trek's history. So we have Caleb in the room too. Got some activity in here today. Welcome, Caleb. Good to see you as always. So let's get into the topic at hand, and I'm eager to hear what exactly, this was definitely a collaborative idea, like we kind of talked about. You talked about off air, just in our casual conversation, Sanctuary being an interesting episode that might be, a cool one to talk about. What about it kind of stood out to you in your experience this time around?
There's a lot of things. It's the start of this setup of this episode is such a great sci-fi concept, right? But I don't know if we've really seen this scale come out of the wormhole. It's always been a ship or two, or someone, fleeing something, or they go back. Yeah. So really, you get this really big sci-fi concept kind of at the beginning of the of the episode, where this whole race is kind of scouring the universe for this wormhole, and they find it. But some of the things that really stand out to me were the I don't know how you can say it. I'll just go right into it. This kind of problem that they go through, it still builds on the premise of the show of the status of Bajor. I think is really cool to see that, even this kind of provisional government still is in shambles. It's still, you can see that kind of on Kira's face. You're like, kind of right. This we're not ready for this, but another thing is you see these similarities between these two leaders, in that Kira, I think, is the leader of this of the kind of the Bajoran people, right? You see this. I'm kind of jumping all over the place, so just stop me and jump in. But Kira is the I don't know if it's kind of she's the face of the the Bajoran people, right? And then you get this, there's similarities I see in, there's this race. I'm just a farmer, and now she's the leader of the. Well, I'm just a freedom fighter, and now she's the face of this. So you see some similarities there.
Parallels, yeah.
In not just Kira and I forget the character's name, but also this kind of the species too, right? This is a species that is kind of uprooted and kind of just kind of all over the place. So yeah, those are my two opening thoughts. I have more things to say.
Sure, but, all really good. Hanik, I think, is her name, the leader of the Skreans. But you're right. I think both of these characters are, Kira and Hanik, are not natural leaders. Like they're not. Kira isn't, a political figure. She's not the head of the government, but for all intents and purposes, she's the face of the Bajorans for the Skreans, and she's on the front line. She's the one who's kind of the ranking officer to gather the information and report it back and make recommendation and filter all the information to the government to make a decision. And she is just like you said, she's a freedom fighter who's kind of elevated to this position. She's not a natural politician or somebody who's in a comfort zone to make a huge decision like this. And Hanik is obviously the same thing. She's just a farmer who happens to be kind of thrust into this position to kind of speak for her people and advocate for this potential solution that they have in mind. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right that it is a big step forward for the show to not have it just be a single ship or a character that we meet, or even like in Move Along Home, it's like it's a first contact situation, and it's a representation from a culture coming in and saying hello. It's it's bigger than that. It's this giant fleet. It's a the potential for a really monumental event coming through that wormhole that's going to really shake up that part of the galaxy. Um, and somebody asked the question: is this the first mention of the Dominion? I think that was Rob. I think it's the second. I think in rules of acquisition, the Ferengi are in the Gamma Quadrant and trying to find foothold for, economic growth opportunities for the Ferengi, and they're dealing with the species, and they get wind of the Dominion being a thing. But we hear them here too.
Which is my next point.
Yeah.
That's such a cool thing that I didn't realize. Just when I think of Deep Space Nine, I didn't realize how early in the show it's kind of built up, and they start working this kind of Dominion. I don't know if it's even a threat yet. Mm-hmm. It's just really cool to see.
It's this foreboding thing that they're getting the impression they're going to have to learn about, and it's just a matter of time before, it becomes a thing for them, for the crew on Deep Space Nine. But yeah, I mean, I think when I think of Sanctuary, it never rises to my favorites list or anything. It's kind of middle of the pack for me, but when you break it down, it's really a lot of big ideas. It does a lot of bigger things. It's got all the stuff we already talked about with this, potential for a giant fleet coming through and resettling an entire society. That's certainly a big concept. As you kind of alluded to, it's really leaning into the premise of Deep Space Nine, really having a strong focus on the place the Bajorans are in, picking up the pieces after the occupation. I think it does a really good job, actually, of putting the Bajorans in this kind of no-win scenario. They could use the Skreans' help in a lot of ways. Like, the Skreans come with a skill set, and they have things to offer that could actually help the Bajorans, pick up and run, and be in a better place if it could cohesively come together. But they're also extremely vulnerable and not ready for this yet. There's good arguments on both sides, and I think they do a good job of building a situation that allows for, it's an easy leap to see, like, political dissent in this decision. Like, there's going to be a side of people that will gravitate toward, let's do this. This is going to be helpful. It's helpful to them. They can help us. It can be a symbiotic kind of thing. And then people on the other side who are like, what are we even talking about? We're nowhere near ready for this. So it does that. But there's also when they first come through, we can't communicate with them. It's difficult. They're not easy to gel with. Like, I struggle a little bit with, isn't there, like, they shed their skin, and I think somebody makes a comment, they don't smell good, they're dirty, they're refugees. And it definitely wants us to think of those kinds of scenarios, and that's certainly maybe even more on the forefront of people's minds now than it was in 1994 or whenever this aired. So, like, how we go through first contact procedures and how we meet people, and how that whole operation works, learning to communicate, all that stuff is here too. Like, the first half of this episode, there's a lot happening, a lot of introduction of big concepts, and seeing big Star Trek things play out, which are all cool and interesting things to unpack.
Mm-hmm. Real quick, just to kind of doubling back to the state of the Bajorans, I like that they still, this episode kind of plays on that they still aren't ready. They're still in shambles. They're still a work in progress, right? I think if it would have been like, the Cardassians are gone, everything's sunshine and rainbows now. But it's not that. It's cool to see that there's still this long running arc of it's gonna take some time to put the pieces back together, which is, it puts you in a weird spot in this episode because you really want this to work and want this to happen, but again, you see the no-win scenario, right? This is so I think that's also a cool thing in this episode for sure.
Yeah, I think the other thing, I mean, there are other parallels. Kira and Hanik definitely have that similarity we talked about. Even the Bajorans and the Skreans themselves, as species, there are some interesting parallels that I see reference to in the chat as well. But Rob talking about definitely parallels between the Bajorans and the Screens. Yeah, I mean, both of these people are, oppressed and have really had a difficult background and upbringing. Both
Yeah.
lean heavily into the idea of, prophecies and are kind of guided by faith. Like the Screens are here because their faith tells them that there's this eye of the universe that's going to lead them to their new
Yeah, they
homeworld.
both have. Yeah.
They really believe in these things, and it's part of their being. They're not doing this out of scientific curiosity. They're not doing this out of, just sheer choice. They're following their faith, and the Bajorans do the same thing. So
Yeah.
it's an interesting. I think it's well constructed. I think the concept is well built and does a lot of things to create an interesting conversation and put our characters in challenging places. And like you said, takes advantage of the premise of the show. One of the big things that Deep Space Nine does radically differently than TNG because of its premise is, of course, the Next Generation, Picard and the Enterprise show up at a planet, they fix the problem, they warp off, and bye-bye, like they're kind of left to deal with it, or maybe the Cerritos eventually comes in to pick up the pieces later down the road to clean up the mess that the Enterprise leaves behind, or to follow through with whatever they put into motion. Deep Space Nine is very different. They live in their problem. I mean, they're dealing with the Bajorans and they're working through the process. Yes.
Yeah.
So, like you said, it's not just a flip the light switch. Oh, the Cardassians left. We put up this provisional government and all is well. Like the Bajorans are governing themselves and all, smooth sailing forward. It's not that simple. I mean, there's political dissent. There's not always agreement. You have factions of support for this and that. It's a complicated dynamic, and the Deep Space Nine, especially, well, all through it really embraces that and makes it a part of its identity. And this episode challenges that and puts that, the Bajoran government to the test, and puts Kira to the test as well by putting her in the mix and, forcing her into the uncomfortable position of having to, take a position and in this case, kind of deliver the news. And I think she has conflicting feelings herself about what is best. She's not entirely for it, but has a relationship with Hanik and knows the Screens have things to offer, and can, I think, see the parallel and understands where these people are coming from and where Hanik is coming from and wants to help, but just can't get there to make it work. So it's an interesting.
But it's almost like a mirror, though, right? These Screens that come from the other side of the wormhole are very similar, but and there's this really I forget the line, but it's how, like, she's talking about, the leader of the Screens is talking about how how the Cardassians have really scarred their people and their perspective on outsiders, which I thought was a really cool and kind of true phrase, I guess.
True. Yeah. Good point. Trucker Prize mentions, and I think he's right, the Universal Translator was struggling for maybe the first time, too, in this episode. Like, I do think this is maybe the first time that in Star Trek, because in TNG you never really get that too often, where the Universal Translator's having difficulty, latching on, and they're kind of really... I mean, in Darmok, they certainly have that problem, but so it's there, too. But similarly here, you get... It's not easy to communicate, like I was talking about earlier. Those scenes in the beginning of the show where they're kind of walking through the promenade and not able to just converse. They're kind of trying to piece it together and come to terms. So I do like that, watching that first contact process play out and have it not be as easy as, oh, let's go meet them at the airlock and shake their hands and introduce ourselves in a language that we both understand and nod and smile and have this diplomatic encounter. Like, it's a little more complicated than that. They have to do the hard work of, getting there to the point where they can communicate and be on a level. So I like that too. This episode also features a little piece of trivia. One of the Screen males is Walter Koenig's son, plays that character. Andrew, I think it's Andrew Koenig, who actually took his own life a few years ago, tragically. I want to say maybe 5-6 years ago. That was a big hit in the Star Trek news world when that all happened. But I believe he's the character who dies at the end of the episode. Spoiler alert! I'm hoping everybody in here happens to be watching this. Yeah, Tumak. is played by Andrew Koenig, who is Walter Koenig's son. Um, so some interesting in continuity Star Trek stuff, and
Yeah.
Kitty Swink, who is Armin Shimmerman's wife, plays a Bajoran minister in this too. So all kinds
It's
of
a
interesting,
cameos.
guest star
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
You get some Jake and Nog stuff here with their kind of um, struggling to relate to the Screens and not getting
Yeah.
along with them. Um, so yeah, there's a lot happening in this. There's
There is a
definitely
lot.
it's
Yeah.
it's a big episode that I think uses the cast pretty well. Puts the premise of the show to the test. Gives different people different things to do. Um, it's an interesting one.
Yeah. It's funny though how my perspective changes a little bit. I think just doing this helps me maybe like this episode a little bit more, just because, just the things we've talked about and things it's doing.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I think it's sometimes difficult for me to separate the qualities like we're talking about, the things on the paper, on the sheet, like on the script,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
the storytelling devices that they're using, the ways they're using the concept of the show, the way they're using the characters, and just like
So
the production
actually
quality as well.
executing it.
It's executing
And,
it.
yeah.
Yeah, like to me, I think I do think the pacing here is a little sluggish. I think it's a little bit of a slog for me personally. I think I can't say that I love the performance. The actress's name I have Memory Alpha handy here. Deborah May plays Hanique, who is a character actress who I've seen in other things. She's. It's not my favorite guest performance. I wouldn't. I do the Trekkie Awards. It's not a performance I would nominate for best guest performance in TNG or DS9 season 2. So there are production elements that I'm not in love with. I think it's also hard to separate. To introduce a concept this big, it does make me curious. Like, what happens? Like, what? I am curious to know. Like, it's one of those dangerous things when even Deep Space Nine at this point is a little bit more episodic than it would eventually become. When you introduce a concept this huge, it kind of begs for maybe a little bit more follow up, or it makes you curious. And but I also don't. I wouldn't have. I didn't love this enough to like want to follow it for the long haul. But it makes me think whether they're too big for their britches that they offer this big huge concept without necessarily committing to it. And so I have mixed feelings for sure.
Yeah. But I guess that is true. But also on the other hand though, isn't this the kind of the point of this kind of thing we're doing here is to find really good things or things that we want to talk about, the positives in each episode
for sure,
that aren't really cited as quote unquote classics. So
I mean, anybody who knows us knows we try to really not delve too much into the negativity. We're not a show that enjoys nitpicking or poking too much at things we don't love. We emphasize, we try to find the things that we do enjoy and like, even when it's a tougher task. We do that as much as we can. This does, though, another thing that I do kind of like here. I've talked about this in some recent conversations that we've had. I think I like when Star Trek. It's going to make me maybe sound a little dark myself and grim. But I like when Star Trek kind of ends on a bittersweet note. I like when Star Trek has episodes that don't end with
like a
crew, sitting around the bridge, sitting around a conference room, chuckling away to the credits.
Ending.
Yeah, and even TOS, they have episodes like Charlie X, like A Private Little War, that end with them kind of having to swallow their pride and they're not happy at the end. This is one. They're mentioned people in the chat, Rob and Trekker Prize and Earl Grey Trekkie, Robbie, are all kind of talking about Duet similarly. Duet's obviously I think a superior episode. more impactful, more important for the show. But it has that like tragic ending, and this one sort of does too. It does not end in a good place for anybody. You know, they're already in a bad place before this young man, you know, takes his ship and burns himself up into the Bajoran atmosphere, or gets himself blown up. Tumak. You know, it ends in tragedy and with nobody feeling good about where things are standing. And in life, a lot of times, life can be a bitter pill to swallow, and so these big problems don't end with a happy ending. They end with kind of a shrug and we got to try our best to move forward. And everybody's got to fend for themselves, unfortunately. And this is one of those episodes that does that. It is a downer. It's not a happy episode. It really puts the characters in uncomfortable positions, and nobody leaves happy. There is, you know, death and despair, and like our friend Jim, Enterprise Extra, when he died, I didn't look before we did this where this sits on his Trek ranks for Deep Space Nine, but if I had to guess, it's probably pretty low, because like for him, he always talks about for when he ranks episodes and is doing that whole thing. He leans really into rewatchability. Is it over like the pacing, the heaviness of it? This is an episode that strikes me as a lower tier for him because of those things, like that really grim, you know, ending and just heavy tone kind of throughout. Did you struggle at all with some of that stuff in the early part of the episode with the you know, like I mentioned before, 142? Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. That makes sense.
At a 173.
Yeah.
So I'm actually surprised it's not. Spectrum.
Yeah, I would have thought maybe even lower.
I was surprised that's actually higher than I expected.
Yeah.
So Rivals is actually below it.
Rob asks a really good question that I'm going to double back to about his honey. I'll double back. But I'm curious, like, were you bothered at all by, because I think maybe one of the things that I rub against with this and pushes it down on my list, I just doesn't do it for me. They try really hard to put the characters into a position that is. So let me back up. When the Skorians are on Deep Space Nine and they're kind of everywhere on the station, the people like Jake and Nog are kind of repelled by them. Like I said, they make comments their skin sheds, they smell. Yep. They're not polite. They bump into you. They're rude.
It's playing on the trope of outsiders.
They're othered people. Yeah. They're refugees. Yeah. They're not welcome. We don't really want them. They're here. We have to have them here. Yeah. But
there's a lot of them. There's 3
million. The sooner they can go, the better. The better. Like, does that doesn't sit well with me? Like seeing our characters, even though it is mostly just like Jake and Nog and Quark. They are characters that you would expect to maybe have those attitudes more so than like Cisco and Dax and Bashir, people like that. Did that give you any discomfort? Did that rub you in a negative way?
Because that's what this station is about. This is what the station is supposed to be. A place where people from the wormhole, they come, people from other, sectors in the Alpha Quadrant. It's what it's supposed to be, and now they're all upset about it does rub me the wrong way.
Yeah, I mean, I think from Starfleet's perspective, for sure, that's kind of its kind of main duty, I guess, is to be the foothold at the front of the wormhole to greet people and sort things out and be a place to take stock of who's coming through and be kind of a common ground for the traffic going in and out of the wormhole. But I mean, for Quark and some of the civilians that are there, they maybe didn't ask for that. And this is kind of early in the show, so maybe they're not as accustomed to, these other people kind of emerging out of nowhere and kind of running roughshod over the place. But even with that being said, it does. I mean, there's just something mean-spirited about a lot of the attitudes that I struggle to embrace, obviously. Yeah. But I think it leaves a taste in my mouth that keeps the episode pushed down a few pegs for me. Yeah. That's some of the stuff that I struggle the most with.
I would definitely agree.
Rob asks, do you think Hanik is a bit harsh and unfair on Kira at the end when Kira's kind of delivering the news and Hanik kind of reacts the way that I mean,
you got to think about it from her perspective, though.
Yeah.
She's a displaced new leader that
didn't ask for this job.
Didn't ask for this job, but also it's put Kira in, like we said at the top of the show, this is a no-win scenario. Like, she can't really do anything because it's her people, but she also agrees with their decision with to not take the screens. So
yeah, I think I agree. I mean, she is not a practiced diplomat. She's not somebody who is trained for this. She's a farmer who's just kind of.
But she's also got a stake in the game, right? This is her people. This is she cares about this.
Yeah, I think by this point,
I don't know if it's too harsh.
It's harsh. I mean, she is not happy, and she doesn't pull her punches. But I think, like you said, if for me, when you put yourself in her shoes as a farmer, as a person who was thrust into this position, and like you said, does have by this point in the episode, I think is kind of, certainly not. She's not a practiced diplomat, like I said, but she's been doing this for a little while. She's been advocating. She's kind of gotten her, gotten some momentum going toward dealing with Kira and dealing with Bajoran people and advocating, and gets the news that it didn't go her way. And the stakes are high. This is the future of her people, and they don't really have anywhere to go beyond this. It's all unknown from here. So I certainly get the harsh feelings, but it is it's one of those things that I think pushes the episode down for a lot of people. That it's not the easiest watch. It's not the most pleasant experience. It's not a happy. And Trekker Prize mentions, like, kind of echoing what I said, or maybe I was echoing what he said, that there's not super positive endings, keeps things real, and one of the reasons Deep Space Nine's great is they do that a lot. A lot of the episodes kind of end on some bitter notes, and this is certainly one of them. But some of those episodes that end on a bitter note I really love, and it's not. And I just said, like, I tend to actually gravitate to those kinds of endings, but this one for some reason, maybe hits a little hard. I guess I don't know.
But it does. This kind of does cut deep.
It does.
I mean, not like a deep cut, but like it's. Man, this is it
hurts.
It's a tough
for the
situation. Yeah, it hurt, and it probably hurts for the Bajorans, right? They, or at least Kira says, like, she kind of, I don't know if I'm reading too much into this, but she kind of realizes, like, oh yeah, we're still not ready. We're still in shambles. The government is a mess.
Yeah.
Our situation is a mess.
Yeah. It says something about where the Bajorans are, and it creates a situation where they have to self-assess, and they're not as far along as they would like to be. I think there is a degree of, if we were in a better place, if we were further along, if we were, maybe the government was in a little bit of a better position, we would be in a better spot to help and maybe get some help ourselves. Like I said, one of the things that I think is the most interesting about this is that the screens do bring things to the table. It's not just a matter of they need a place to be. Like, they have skills, they have things in their toolkit. They have farmers and then the Bajorans are dealing with, a famine, and the planet is ravaged.
It does
adds up.
Yeah, it adds up.
Yes, couldn't agree. I couldn't agree more.
But curious though, there's no faith element on the Bajoran side, right? They could claim that these, the prophets sent this group of people, but there was no, their faith element in this.
Right.
Very curious to me, but.
Well, as we're hitting the 45-minute mark, we love to see it. A good little chunk of people in the chat, a good little handful. We have Earl Grey, Trekkie, we have Rob, we have Caleb, we have Trekker Prize. I'm curious to ask you guys, just thumbs up, thumbs down on Sanctuary. Are you without going into, like, you can give a 1 to 10 or anything, but I'm most interested in, is it a thumbs up or is it a thumbs down? Are you yay or nay on Sanctuary?
I'm thumbs mostly up. I don't think it's maybe 142.
Mm-hmm.
That is, as it is cited on the great Trek Ranks rankings. But yeah, I think there's some really good stuff in this.
Yeah, I'll be really eager to revisit it in the context of Deep Space Nine, like as like in the full rewatch when I hit it.
Yeah, out of context, yeah,
Yeah,
it could be a little bit different.
sure. My thumb is going to point a little down on the production side of things, but
Don't feel pressure.
Yeah. No, but I do love the conversation that it brings forward. I think it does create a cool discussion to be had. I think it asks interesting questions. I think it uses the premise of the show well. I think all the stuff on paper, the stuff that's written, is interesting from the bare bones like concept perspective. It's a cool story. I can see why they went in that direction. If it was I don't know the background of it, was it one of those, especially in those years, like a spec script that they bought? Was it a pitch they took from somebody that they bought and ran with? I can see how a pitch like this would be like, oh, this is great. We could do something great with this. I think some of the execution falls a little flat, but it's a little bit of a mixed bag. Thumbs up from Rob. He really likes it. 7 out of 10 from Earl Grey Trekkie. Thumbs up from Trekker Prize. Good episode with great ideas. Caleb's thinking he needs to rewatch. Needs a fresh take on it, which I totally respect too. It's yeah.
But I mean, when you got to run with Second Sight and Necessary Evil and you know a few other episodes, it's I don't think it's completely wholeheartedly thumbs down.
No, I mean I certainly think I don't think it's anywhere near as good as Necessary Evil, but I think it's a lot better, a lot more interesting than Second Sight is. Second Sight is a sleepy, like, you can't sleep at night. It's a good one to put on to maybe help you go ahead and doze off. The Sanctuary, I think, it has a lot more meat on the bones than some of the episodes in that early part of season 2. I'm thinking of episodes like I certainly prefer it to Melora. I prefer it to. I think I even prefer it to Rivals. I like what Rivals does with O'Brien and Bashir. Take or leave
sure.
some of
the Quark stuff.
The Quark stuff with the other
and the guest star.
Yes, some of that stuff I could kind of do without, but I do really like the O'Brien Bashir banter and the racquetball, the development of their friendship. But Sanctuary certainly I think offers more big ideas than that does, and even some of the episodes coming up, I would maybe. I'm more interested to talk about Sanctuary than some of those other episodes, which is to its credit. And that's one of the best things about Star Trek is that it's a conversation starter. It's something that you can, banter back and forth with somebody and, not argue, but, have different ideas about. And Sanctuary is one of those episodes that presents what Star Trek tries to do in a lot of its best episodes as a moral dilemma, a difficult thing to reckon with. And it does it well, I think. I think it puts the audience in a position to have to take a stand, like Kira and the Bajorans have to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you think the Bajorans made the right choice?
Because I like that they aren't ready, but I also think that they need him. So I think that's one of the best things about this episode is it really is a no-win scenario.
Yeah.
Let's say, I think both work very well. Let's say they do stay. That would be a really fun dynamic to kind of explore, a new roommate type deal. And then we could go different ways down that road. It works out, it doesn't work out, things like that.
Yeah.
One thing I guess we didn't mention too is it, along with playing on the premise of the show, just real quick at the end.
Sure.
Because they're pushing that hour mark, but it plays on the wormhole too.
Sure.
From a new species that we get to see, other side of the galaxy. So I like that as well.
Yeah, Deep Space Nine, I think at this point is kind of juggling two sort of
a lot of balls.
Like on one hand over here you have in the Alpha Quadrant, you have the Bajoran Cardassian stuff with the Federation kind of looming, like all that political machinations that are home to the Alpha Quadrant that are there when Sisko and company get to Deep Space Nine, picking up the pieces on Bajor, Gul Dukat hovering in the distance. You have that, and then you have on the other side of the wormhole, you have this, the big Star Trek stuff of strange new worlds, new cultures, new societies, the Dominion, like what's over there. There are planets to see, people to meet. And Deep Space Nine is kind of always juggling, I think, in the early days especially. Sometimes it's this, sometimes it's that. And I think this episode does both. It puts the A stuff with the Bajorans and the home Alpha Quadrant stuff to the test because of something that came from the wormhole. So it's it's one of those things. It's what we do on this show. I come in with an idea, it's a thumbs down, and I'm thinking, maybe I've been too harsh on it for the last 25 years. I've always discounted Sanctuary as like a middle of the road, interesting kind of failure, but maybe not just you, Dan, but Trekker Prize and Robbie and Rob and Caleb just having the conversation with everybody and having like a more open, discussion about it opens a lot of thoughts and ideas. Makes me reconsider, which is why I love doing this. Yeah.
Thanks, Caleb. Take care.
Yep. Thanks, Caleb. So one thing that I would maybe want to share with everybody as we kind of wrap this up, as an idea, anybody out there, if you're watching this here live or maybe on replay down the road, if you have an episode that you have in mind as like an undervalued piece of Star Trek, an episode that you don't see discussed that you really love for this reason or that, share it with us. Let us know. We're going to be looking for those kinds of episodes ourselves, but we're open to all kind of possibilities. And, we're not afraid to have guests on with us and have discussions with other folks. So if you advocate for an episode that you think is kind of undervalued for this reason or that, we would certainly have an open mind to maybe not only talking about that episode, but maybe having you on to share your thoughts and advocate for your choice. So we're curious to hear what other people have to say on undervalued episodes.
One thing that I really love about this topic that's going to be cool to see moving forward is it changed my perspective on my rewatch a little bit. I'm going to be looking for a little bit different episodes now, not just the classics. So
and that's
I really like that.
Couldn't agree more. I'm always doing like one of the cool things about this whole Twitter experience going back a few years now is like at first it was just sharing my thoughts on Twitter and doing brief little reviews and then doing polls and trying to accumulate groupthink assumptions and what do people think of these episodes, and then Trekkie awards, and like it's always about for me like finding new reasons to keep watching and new things to look for. And so it's not just put it on, have it on in the background and have it be like white noise because it's comfortable and I love it so much. Like I want to challenge myself to look for new things and have new reasons to keep watching it, and this is something that I think will accomplish that. I'm looking for episodes that maybe I've discounted, I don't think get enough discussion. Maybe there are things I missed. Maybe there are people out there who love it that I haven't, been exposed to. So yeah, I'm really eager to keep doing this and come back to it every so often. It's not going to be an every week thing. We have other rotating topics that we also love to do. The fantasy drafts, the character spotlights like we did last week with Deanna.
Guess each other's
favorites. We have a writer's room thing that we do. Done a couple of times where we try to hash ideas, and so we want to keep going back to everything, and this is just going to be one of those rotational topics, and we're looking forward to doing more of them. So
cool.
Yeah. Any content, anything you want to shout out, anything special?
No, I don't think so. We did a really fun core setting Thursday night. It was really fun. I think that's a good thing to mention. Tackling the most recent Lower Decks. I can confidently say that one of those episodes was my favorite this season. So definitely go check that out. Yeah,
I'll share this too. Like we did that, and I really enjoyed that conversation. And that night, I posted a question: "What's your favorite episode of Lower Decks so far?" And sometimes I'll tweet a question like that, and it catches on and I get a lot of responses, and that happened there. And I woke up the next morning and there were a whole bunch of responses. And interesting aside, there were some interesting responses from the kinds of folks that I don't normally hear from. People saying things like, "None of them. I don't watch it. I don't like it. Lower Deck sucks." And I realized that the Star Trek official account retweeted it, which is a mixed blessing because it's nice to get that exposure and it's an honor for the official Star Trek
get
account
more
to
of a mixed bag.
But you get more of it brings out the crazies a little bit with the people who like to crap on things that other people love. So that was interesting. But in that thread of many, many responses, it was interesting to have that conversation with you, and we kind of bandied about, is this the best episode of the series so far? And in that question, there were a whole lot of Veritas responses. I think it's a pretty big. It's becoming a fan favorite already, and a lot of people seem to have it at the top of their list. So so core setting's another one that we do. We do that every other week right now. We're probably going to transition to weekly with Discovery being a little bit more intense. But stay tuned for more on that when we'll be doing those live streams. You can find them on the Course Heading Twitter account. Scroll through that feed and you're going to see pretty much nothing but recorded live streams going back a ways with just talking episodes of Lower Decks, Picard from earlier this year. They're all there. And then for us on Trek Live, you can find many of those live streams on my Twitter feed, but most easily on the Trek Live YouTube channel, where all of our conversations end up being uploaded and saved. So, Trek Reprise begs to disagree. This is not the best for him, but to each their own. That's what we love. We love the mixed. That's why I asked the question. I love hearing all the takes on conversations like what's the best episode, what's your favorite. For me it's Envoys still, I think, at least as of today, but tomorrow it could be different. I'm still processing, but we're just shy of the hour mark. I think that'll about do it for us this week. I appreciate everybody who stopped by, Robbie, Trekker Prize, and Caleb, swinging by, sharing your thoughts, being a part of it. Yeah. We love it. We love when we have people join us and kind of steer the conversation and give us some interesting questions to ponder. And you guys definitely did that. I appreciate the participation, and thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with us. Okay, so we will be back. Probably not next week. I think next week's going to be an off week. We have one half of the Trek Live team relocating, hopefully one last time for the foreseeable future. Yep. Yeah. Over the course transferred. But it's a good thing. It's a happy thing. It'll be a more settled situation, and with that, we might have in the next few weeks an opportunity for maybe a Trek After Dark, which is a real
good things on the horizon.
Yes, a lot of freed up opportunities, I think, on both of our schedules, with more conditions that are make it easier to do things like that. So stay tuned. We do have a Discord server, which I highly encourage anybody watching, if you enjoy our content, if you like hanging out with us. It's low key, but it's active. Positive, friendly Star Trek fans sharing ideas, talking about what they like, sharing what they're watching, what they're reading, YouTube stuff that they like. All that stuff's happening there. And we have occasional, we call it Trek After Dark. It's our relaxed, unrecorded, unstreamed kind of virtual hangout. We watch episodes as a community. We do trivia. We do this or that. We just talk and
all good stuff.
Maybe have a synthahol or two, talking Star Trek life, whatever we have going on. Get to know each other. It's cool. And we haven't done it for a little bit, but like I said, we're kind of transitioning to a point in the calendar and some living situations that I think might make it a little easier to do it. So stay tuned, and if you join that server, you kind of have the in on all those things. So if you're interested in joining, if you're a Discord user and you want to be a part of that, send me a DM on Twitter at TrekFan4387, and I'd be happy to send you an invitation and give you all the tools you need to be a part of that. And I don't think you'd regret it. So,
Nope. Yep.
Cool. Thank you to everybody watching live or recorded.
Yeah, thank you.
And have a good rest of the weekend, and see you hopefully soon.
Yep. Thanks for watching, everyone.
Bye.